If you look at technology simply as a bunch of technical features, algorithms, and all of that, you miss the whole point. This is why over 70% of digital transformation initiatives fail because we don't account for the people side of things.
Hello, this is Shirley Kavanagh, and you're very welcome to the Leadership Discoveries podcast. Here I chat with leaders and experts across a variety of sectors and geographies who share their experience and views on a range of leadership topics. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Kisito Futonge Nzembayie, Assistant Professor, Trinity Business School, Director of the MSc in Entrepreneurship and Innovation. He's also a serial EdTech founder and has a number of active digital ventures with a reach of 80 million users worldwide. And Kisito is a scholar practitioner in the area of digital entrepreneurship. His work spans platform-based ventures, generative AI in business education, and action research. And he's also fluent in multiple languages, including Mandarin. And with over a decade of business experience in China, he brings a truly global lens to growth, resilience, and innovation. Kisito, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Shirley, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm delighted you agreed to come on this podcast, actually, because I know we've touched on these subjects before, and I'm really interested in exploring them a little bit more with you. But what a CV! I mean, what a background! Could we maybe just start? In fact, could you tell us your career story to date, actually?
Yeah, no, you've summed it up very well to start with. But you see, my journey to academia started with practice, and that started back in 2002 when I left Cameroon after my degree my undergraduate degree in journalism and mass communication, and headed off to China with the plan to teach English for a year, and then further my education in Europe. Now, what I found was a very dynamic country. China was changing rapidly, and there were several opportunities there. So I went from teaching English, trading across continents, then started my own ventures that proved highly successful. But I didn't feel confident enough in my abilities as an entrepreneur, so I sought formal education. And in 2014, I moved here to Ireland to begin a master's in business and entrepreneurship. And that would lead to a master's in business and entrepreneurship, followed by a PhD in digital entrepreneurship. And that then connected my practice as a digital entrepreneur with scholarship. And this is how it's through that process and teaching in academia that I've come to transition fully into scholarship at the moment, teaching in an area where I've had the several years of practice. Now, academia was very good in terms of giving me the opportunity to reflect on several years of practice, and I've found that very addictive, and that's why I've made the transition to full scholarship.
It's great, actually, just to see that intersection of the practitioner and the academic, because just being able to transverse across those two worlds is so important, isn't it, Casito, that you can actually bring those two lenses.
Yeah, I like to think of myself as a pracademic because
Yes.
I really struggle to get rid of, and not that it's a good idea to get rid of it, that my entrepreneurial DNA. So I'm still building things. I'm still involved in the ethic ventures I have, like you mentioned, are still live. But also I'm looking at other areas and still engaged in all of that. So that helps. There's a symbiotic relationship there between that immersion in practice and scholarship. So I like that academic identity, which is what I am right now.
And Kisito, I want to talk to you about all things digital, but I have to say, I'm actually very interested now that just even hear you talk there about this concept of entrepreneurship. And, I know a lot of organizations want to build that entrepreneurial spirit within their organizations. How do they do that? How do we do that within the confines of the corporate often? Like, what do you see? What sort of the magic ingredient do you think that actually gets that going?
Right. You're touching on a point here that has come up in several of my executive education training, where I've highlighted to most leaders in digital transformation courses and AI courses that what you are is cultivating the mindset of a digital entrepreneur, the one entrepreneur. And entrepreneur is an entrepreneur within an established organization. That is to say, This is an individual who sees the world as always being in the making. The world is never complete. The organization is never complete. They understand that yesterday's success does not define tomorrow's success. And therefore, organizations are constantly in the making. They're comfortable with uncertainty, all right? And they continuously leverage experimentation, curiosity, as tools, as mental tools to revitalize organizations. That's it in a nutshell.
Where does failure come into that, Kisito? Because often that can be the constraint for a lot of organizations where the entrepreneurial spirit or the entrepreneurial spirit exists. What's your view on failure?
Now, failure, it depends on how you look at it. Now, the entrepreneur is comfortable with failure, but that failure is managed through a process of experimentation. That is to say, we understand that the future is uncertain, and because that future is uncertain, we engage in calculated risk taking. As an entrepreneur, I always say that one of the biggest myths about entrepreneurship is that the entrepreneur is a risk taker. The entrepreneur is not a blind risk taker, they are calculated risk takers. And the tools by which they go about doing that is experimentation. And in the process of experimentation, you are comfortable with failure because you know that experiments have no known outcomes. You're trying to learn. So you're always in that learning mode. You're trying to experiment to learn. So you're comfortable with failure and you try to fail cheap, all right? And then learn from there and iterate. So for instance, to launch a big, massive AI project, if you look at a very long, complicated AI project that you were trying to develop in an organization, can you break that up into a microcosm of that project and then experiment, build it, test it in increments? If it fails, that's okay. But if it fails small, we learn from there and iterate rather than take this plan and execute approach assuming that the future is certain. So this individual with the entrepreneurial mindset is very comfortable with failure and leverages experimentation as the tool with which they manage the challenges of an uncertain future.
And that concept of experimentation, I suppose, it kind of gives the permission, doesn't it, to try things, and of course in a calculated risk taking way, not in a sort of free for all.
Yeah, no, it's it like in entrepreneurship here. One of the things I would teach you all the time, like we would teach our students, is and this is it. We sum up experimentation is the tool entrepreneurs use to control an uncertain future.
Hmm.
We don't engage in prediction, we engage in controlling the future. And in controlling that future, you leverage experimentation.
It's a great concept, actually, and I think it's something that within practice we can understand that almost, that it's not an obscure sort of construct. Can I just move on to the whole digital space, because I know this is kind of a real sweet spot for you, and the first question I have to ask you, Kisito, is in relation to generative AI. Do you think we're at the top of the hype cycle in relation to that? Or, are we sort of still finding out about it, or will we always be trying to find out about it?
That's anybody's guess at this moment. Most people think that we're at the top of a hype cycle. Some people think that we're not. But when I look at the whole technology and the space and how fast, I mean, think about it. It was in 2022, end of 2022, that ChatGPT awakens us to a technology that has actually been developed earlier. That is to say, back in 2017. Google employees that invented this transformer architecture. All right. And then ChatGPT really brings that to the consumer space, and we all experience the power of this technology. And since then, if you look back from 2022, there have been significant improvements, advances in this technology in such a short space of time. My sense is that the technological progress is not slowing down anytime soon. But again, when we talk about hype, are we talking about hype in terms of expectations? Are we talking about hype in terms of stock markets and, investors and what they're pumping? Now, again, if you look at it in terms of the technology and its capacity to generate value, you can experience that yourself firsthand and you can see. So, for instance, back in 2002, when I tried a tool called Midjourney to create images, the images were pretty awful. Right now, you see really photorealistic images coming out. Nano Banana Pro, all of these tools, they have, if you've been in the space experimenting, you realize that they've improved significantly. So, from that perspective, it's not hype. It's a powerful technology that's impacting several industries, several areas of work. The fact that work that used to take me 2 months to do, that I can now do in 24 hours, that's not hype. That's real. Now, in terms of investors and how much they're pumping into all of this, well, there is a bit of that. But we also know that investors don't always invest based on a reasonable or rational calculus. All right. Some of it is formal, fear of missing out, and all of that.
Yeah.
Also, if I'm the technological guy, let's say I'm the creators of generative AI systems, maybe it's in my interest also to hype the technology a bit. All right. I want to hype it because now the world is paying attention to me and I'll get all the funding that I need to see the end of this technology. I don't think that even they know the very edges of this technology.
Yeah.
But with the resources that they have now, they can find out. And we're all in this big experiment where we are all finding out as we go along. But what I can tell you, whether it's hype or not, I can tell you for sure that this is a very powerful technology. It's very transformative. It's going to impact several spheres of life,
Hmm.
very much akin to the dot-com bust on the internet, where we had, yes, there was massive investments in companies that were really worthless, but the internet as an infrastructure did not cease to advance. It carried on, and today it's transformative. So all of that investment paid off. It's an infrastructure investment that we're seeing. Much of that money is going out to lay the groundwork, the infrastructure, is building the data centers, upon which more of this technology is going to be constructed. So from that perspective, that infrastructural basis will carry on providing opportunities for further value. From the dot-com era, we've moved from Web 1.0 to Web 2.0. And on that Web 2.0 infrastructure, it was an interactive web then. We constructed an interactive web. All right. And on top of that infrastructure, we build social media platforms. If you look at the emergence of several social media platforms, the dominant ones today emerged in the wake of Web 2.0, and that's somewhere around the middle of sometime around early 2000s to middle of 2000s. We see.
Hmm.
What have we done on top of on top of this interactive web? We've generated tons of data. All right. And what does machine learning eat for breakfast? Big data. All right. We've trained that and we've built these smart computational systems that allow us to make sense of all of this mountain of data. And that is driving the next wave of technological evolution. So we're right here in the middle of it. We are seeing this carrying on, and this will carry on for a while.
And this intersection of the human and technology. And you only have to look at LinkedIn actually, and there's a lot of conversations around the human skills that are still very much important. How do you view that intersection? What do you see it as?
I'm afraid I'm going to get theoretical here. One of the things that I tend to see in the discussion on technologies that people take the two main perspectives that have dominated. You have what we call a technical deterministic perspective. That is to say, people look at a technology and say, oh, it's going to do all of this. They look at the features of a technology and work from there and say, this is going to happen. But a more sophisticated way of looking at technology is from a relational perspective. It is best to understand technologies as potentialities. And these potentialities mean that it will interact with every individual's cognition differently. And
Hmm.
people are going to see possibilities that you and I never anticipated. That's why every day I'm very surprised by what people are doing with the same technology that I'm playing with. Another person is using it in a way that totally blows my mind. All right. And that's because at the intersection of technology, the potentials of technology happen when humans bring their values, their cognitions, their ethics, all of those things, and they unlock different possibilities. So that is the broad theoretical look at what is happening at this business, I take that relational perspective. It is that interaction between us and our cognitions that will produce surprises that you and I never anticipated. We cannot fully predict at this moment because we haven't fully seen. I don't know what some guy in their garage or some girl in their garage
Yes.
somewhere is doing with the technology at the moment. All right. So a technical deterministic view would say, all right, this is going to happen. That is the predicted outcome. No, we cannot be 100% sure because I don't know what other people are working with. So take, for instance, the issue of deepfake. All right. Deepfake
Yeah.
videos, AI videos, there are several tools that allow people to clone others using images that they've left on the internet and all of that and create deep fakes out of them. Then it looked like this was the end of it, but somebody's working on a watermarking system, all right, on how we can then determine whether these videos are fake or not. And when I looked at the technology behind that, it was like, wow, like somebody has unlocked the potential for sorting out fake. Now it's still at early stages, but I never anticipated that, all right. I think it's IQ or Synth ID is a tool from Google or so. So we never know what the next human is working on when they see a
Yeah.
technology. That's why that relational perspective of technologies as potentialities is a very powerful lens to understand this, as opposed to a deterministic perspective that says, hey, here are the features. I think this is what is certainly going to happen. And we should therefore start to do this because we know that this is the end of the story. It's not really, you don't know. We have to just keep an open mind and learn as we go along.
That's fascinating, actually, because I mean, there's so much at the moment in relation to certain platforms being unreliable now because of deep fake, because of videos, because we don't really know what we're looking at, quite frankly. But you kind of forget that there's somebody to that watermarking technology you're talking about. It's kind of a bit like cat and mouse. There's somebody already trying to work on something that actually will give us a different perspective on some of that, which is fascinating, actually. Can I just ask you about AI readiness? Because I think I read one of your articles and you were saying that you took the view that AI readiness is more than just technology. Can you tell us what you mean by that? What are the sort of the other adjacent skills, let's say, that go around that? If a leader was listening to this at the moment, this sort of concept of AI readiness, what else are you looking for?
A popular misconception, again, coming back to our relational perspective about technology, if you look at technology simply as a bunch of technical features, algorithms, and all of that, you miss the whole point. This is why over 70% of digital transformation initiatives fail because we don't account for the people side of things. All right. So AI readiness isn't just about technology. In fact, I would say technology is such an objective thing in terms of here its features and the rest, right? We can look at the features. We could say this thing has, let's say we say a camera, this has a high definition camera. Okay, good, we can see that. But it doesn't explain why Shirley might see the potential to create an award-winning documentary on a budget while I don't see that. So coming back to this idea, technology, AI readiness isn't just about the AI and the technology. It's about three main things, if you ask me. It's about people, process, and purpose. Okay. So when we talk about people, it's the employees. How do they feel about AI? Do they see it as a threat or do they see it as an opportunity? If people see things as a threat, for instance, like people are afraid that it might take away their jobs, if we don't deal with that, then whatever AI initiative you're trying to bring into the organization is going to falter because people are not very comfortable with that. Are you training your employees on how to integrate AI into workflows and not just technical teams? Or do you have some kind of AI champions within that can try and help to drive that, to overcome or to reduce those fears? But then there's also process, all right? AI needs consistent processes. If you are, for instance, in sales forecasting, it's done differently in every region. Your forecast will be unreliable because it's done differently. So AI readiness might mean for standardizing how you collect pipeline data. Also, that's a process on how you collect data or how you log customer interactions. So AI can produce something meaningful out of it. So what processes do you have in place to ensure that, for instance, you're collecting reliable data? Because like we've said again, well, like one thing we know very clearly about AI is garbage data, garbage AI.
Mhm.
That it's that simple. So do you have processes in place? If those processes aren't in place, then you might end up collecting data that's not accurate, and then you might build a system that doesn't perform very well. Then, of course, you must ask the question purpose, and this is value. All right. You must link it. Why are we integrating this AI tool? What is the business value? What's the purpose of this particular AI tool? Is it operational efficiency? Are you trying to increase sales? Is it business model innovation? All right. If we lose sight of that, then you bring a shiny new technology, bring it in there, and it's doing nothing for people. All right. And is the technology designed in a way that, for instance, is very user friendly? So I remember I was in a session once and with an organization that shall remain nameless. One of the employees was talking about this tool that they had built inside for employees to use to log their expenses. And one of them just turned around and said, "It is the most awful system I've ever seen." Much to the shock of the engineers, because the engineers thought that they had done their job to build this very functional system. And the problem that the individual raised was that this is very confusing. The interface is confusing. So again, what happens if we don't consider this human factors, the people side? People are going to abandon that technology, and you'd have wasted a lot of money. So it is bringing everyone along. It's people, process, and purpose.
In some way, I mean, that's really neatly put, Casito, but in some way, it's kind of a bit of an age-old problem, isn't it? That disconnect. But I think the other thing that strikes me just you're talking there is this connection to strategy. So, do you find in your interaction with organizations that the technology is connected to strategy, or are we finding because this is so glamorous and so exciting that people are running away from that connection, if you know what I mean, and creating technologies that may not actually be the core value add that's actually there? You know, are you seeing enough connection?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I don't know. It depends again from different organizations' perspective. It appears that you were seeing less of an adoption beyond pilots, for instance, in established organizations, because they're still struggling to articulate that value. They're struggling to determine, can we use this reliably? All right, there are still problems of hallucinations and the rest. How do we deal with that? Yes, organizations appear to be taking a cautious approach. There's still also a massive need for training, again, the people aspect. You go in there, sometimes I go into a session and I think I have to be careful how I state things because you might assume that everybody has this foundational understanding of how generative AI works, and you realize that we're all still taking baby steps in that regard. So there's need to try and bring people along. But for some organizations that are more advanced, you occasionally hear people complaining that we're shopping. We have all these tools now, and we don't know what they're for or something. So it might also be the case that maybe the strategy they have identified a tool that is potentially useful for the organization. But again, that people aspect has to be developed, training and all of those for it to catch on. But look, we're at early stages.
Yeah. And I'm struck by something that you just said there, you know, around, I suppose, the competence, let's say, of some people around the whole technology space. And I know you and I have talked about digital fluency. I know you talk about it an awful lot. Can you just describe what that is and what do business leaders need to have? And if I can be very bad and ask a third question, is how can they actually build it? How can we build digital fluency as leaders?
Now, let's start with digital literacy. Digital
Yeah.
fluency is what you get after digital literacy. So, digital literacy is knowing how to use tools, how to use AI tools for everyday work. So, for instance, you can open an AI assistant, ChatGPT, and ask it to summarize a document or maybe generate a draft email. Okay, that's all well and good. Now, digital fluency is thinking strategically with AI. That's how I like to look at it. It's understanding when to use it, where it fits in your value chain, what are the risks around it, how it can be adopted responsibly, what opportunities does this create, all right? So a digitally literate business leader, let's say in sales, might ask, for instance, AI to tidy up to tidy up an email. So you might
Yeah.
go and you say, you ask AI to tidy up an email or format this email in a tone and style that is suitable for a certain audience. But the digitally fluent leader will look at that and ask, for instance, how can I use AI to, optimize my inbound sales processes, prioritize conversations that are likely to drive conversions? How can I use it to personalize outreach at scale? And how do I measure this performance? So they're always very focused on what the purpose of this is for value creation, so they're looking beyond just applying a tool for its sake, but how that drives business value. This is the space of digital fluency or AI fluency, to be more specific.
Are we doing enough, do you think, to develop that?
I think that we are still at the very early stages of cultivating fundamental AI literacy or digital literacy.
Right.
All right, especially with AI in particular. Now we keep mixing digital literacy, AI literacy is part of digital literacy.
Yes.
All right, but it's the newest an evolution of that. When it comes to AI literacy specifically, I think we're at early stages of cultivating that AI literacy. But for leaders, they need to move past this AI literacy. They need to be ahead of the pack. They need to be moving into the space of digital fluency or AI fluency at this moment. That's how you develop the broad systemic view in order to come back to you're a leader pretty much, all right? That's how you lead by moving ahead of the pack and acquiring that fluency and then leading organizations in the right direction to unlock value with artificial intelligence.
And one thing that you said a little bit earlier, Kisito, was around the digital transformation efforts failing. You mentioned sort of different components that are important there. Is literacy stroke fluency at the leadership level one of the contributors to failure, do you think, of digital transformation projects?
Yes, yes, you would look at that because the research is very clear that, for instance, some of the reasons digital transformation projects fail is maybe a lack of clear vision. All right. It's not uncommon to walk into an organization. They're not very clear what, for instance, they have to do with AI. Leadership hasn't articulated where we are going with this particular technology. So that can contribute to failure, and that's a problem right there. So in most of these executive education courses, we try to emphasize that that's important. All right. It's for you to articulate that vision because once you have that vision, you provide clarity, you provide guardrails along which other people can comfortably, experiment. You can cultivate the culture around that. But without that, then you end up in a situation where everybody's asking, what are we doing here? Why are we bringing in this? Nobody understands the rationale or whether it's safe to use AI under what context. A big problem that we see now with artificial intelligence is that employees, you tend to have what I call a jagged edge of artificial intelligence, where some employees are very advanced in their knowledge, but because there's a lack of clarity, they hide their use of the technology. All right. They don't know whether they'll be penalized for saying, for instance, they use AI in a particular way. So there's a shadowy use of the technology in organization. But again, that's highlighting a leadership gap there. Yes, if you had clear leadership there, then you would harness that and provide clarity so that it becomes a tool for value creation, or sorry, an opportunity for value creation, as opposed to letting employees wander with no clear direction.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering what your view is actually, because I know there's a lot of discussion around it in terms of in education, for instance, the use of artificial intelligence in education. What's your thoughts on it? What are your views?
One thing, my position is that AI is here to stay. All right. It's here to stay. And what we need to step back and ask ourselves, what are we as educators educating for? All right. Are we preparing students for a future that's right here before them? What is the essence of education? AI is here to stay, and we have to deal with it. We have to embrace it, all right? Not just deal with it. It's not a problem. It's what happens with technology. All technologies are going to bring challenges. They're going to bring opportunities. I'm always surprised by how the ancient Greeks had a better understanding of technology than we do. They called things like technologies pharmacons. Pharmacon in Greek term, that it's that which cures but also poisons. All right, this dual-edged nature of technology, it's going to happen. Whether it's every other technology you look back brought its own opportunities and challenges, and AI has just thrust us right into it because it is tampering with models of assessments. It's tampering with certain practices, but then we need to step back and ask whether those practices are still fit for purpose
Hmm.
in an era where AI, now in my own courses, for instance, one of the things that we're doing is to try and make sure that learning is a lot more authentic, all right? And that was always there. And actually, we as educators have known that. So, for instance, in the entrepreneurship space or business space generally, that making education more authentic, more close to practice, has always been the way to go. Now, AI has just turbocharge that, in my view. We have to do more of that, and we have to change the way we assess students, we assess learning. And that doesn't mean that we'll be getting rid of the technology because I'm not of the view that we ban it. I'm not that
Yeah.
person. But I do recognize that there are circumstances where you might want to suspend the use of artificial intelligence until, let's say, students have built a certain foundation, but it's not an outright ban. That's not a realistic position, if you ask me. It's embracing the technology, providing necessary guardrails on how to use it responsibly, because without that guidance, who's going to provide that to the students?
And Kisito, like I get a sense of optimism from you in relation to technology and generative AI and wherever it takes us. Do you ever have any concerns? Are there things that worry you about it?
I do, but again, first of all, let me address that optimism. I'm an optimist because the reason I'm here talking to you, Shirley, is because digital technologies brought me out of poverty, brought my family out of poverty. Some poor boy from Africa went to China, launched his business, he started rich millions of people, and then was able to use those funds to sponsor family and all. So from that perspective, I'm optimistic. Technology has shown me the bright side. But also, there are threats to technology. If we allow that to happen, this is why this relational perspective becomes very important. We have agency. We have the capacity to shape technology in a way that positively impacts us. All right, and that means having the conversation about being aware of the risk. We need to start with an awareness. What are those threats, and what mechanisms can we put? So I know that there are risks, but I'm not concerned about it. I am also aware that in this world, we invented the technology that should have wiped us out, and we're still here. It's nuclear weapons, all right? And we still talked around them. We still found ways around it. AI is not going to be something that we cannot, with a bit of agency, take control of its harm and make sure that it works for us, not against us. But of course, the concerns will only exist if we just fold our arms and sit by and do nothing. So, for instance, as a lecturer or as a professor in a university, what do you do when do you just carry on with your old models of assessments when you know for a fact that now students can just pop in the answer in
Yeah.
ChatGPT and submit it? Or do you enact your agency as a lecturer and change your models of assessments, making education more authentic with AI, not against it, showing students what responsible use is? I just completed a course in my MSc in entrepreneurship. It's a new course that I created, digital entrepreneurship and scaling. And in that course, there was a lot of AI, obviously. It's a digital entrepreneurship module. One of the things we started with AI, we looked at all the beautiful things that you can do as an entrepreneur with the technology. And when that was done, the next class was, oh, here are all the ways it can go wrong. Here are all the ways you think when you write that AI slop and all of that and put it in your CV and put it out there. and you send it out to a very discerning employer, you're undermining your credibility. All right. You're undermining yourself and all of that. And they go, oh. So it leads to that awareness and then a discussion on how then do you responsibly do that? How do you add that human judgment? How do you make it yours rather than just taking some material out there from ChatGPT, passing it on and thinking that you have
Yeah.
this very smart people. You're not doing that, you're deceiving yourself. So once you raise that awareness, students come away with a more responsible understanding of how to use the technology. But I suppose I'm talking too much there.
No, and just that word responsibility, I think that's one of the key words, isn't it, Kisito, for everybody actually when it comes to technology, just being aware of the responsibility that we have to use it with care, I suppose. Just one thing that I'm very reluctant to bring this conversation to a close, but I have to. But just before we close, I'm interested in a perspective on your career, because one of the things I talk to people a lot about in my practice is around the area of cultural intelligence, for instance. And you just mentioned there, going from Africa, going to China, the opportunity that existed over there. What did you learn from that experience, in terms of this, cultural awareness? How do we work across from east to west? Let's say, what was it you actually learned through that experience?
First of all, learning that, I remember my early days in China where I went in, and first of all, I went through the honeymoon phase. I was like, wow, this is all fascinating and all of that. Then there was a phase where, okay, it's not quite like home and everything. But then stopping to recognize that this is a 5,000-year-old civilization or something, it's not going to change for you. All right. You have to start with the humility that people have evolved the way they have. So China taught me how to respect other people, their history, their culture, and how they come to perceive things and respect that. All right. As a way of being successful in the businesses that I do there. So what happens is if you go to what I often found people miss when they go to China. For instance, Western leaders going to China, it might be the fact that, they're expecting it to be like the West. All right. They're expecting it to be like home. No, China's 5,000 years. They're a proud civilization. They're not going to change for you. And so you have to adapt. So that China taught me how to be very culturally, sensitive and adaptive. I think that that's a
Yeah.
great lesson that I take away from China. As a country, the sheer scale and speed of things in China is nothing, like you see here. The Singles Day, for instance, all right, volumes of traffics of traffic of orders and payments. It's hard for a Western lens to imagine that. In 2025, the Singles Day brought in about $100 billion in 24 hours. All right. For us, it's just hard to grapple with that, to understand this whole country, but you need to understand it on its own terms. It's a centrally controlled system with 1.4 billion people, strong and emerging economy, and they do things their own way. Some things catch on. It's a singles day. Guess where what day does the singles day fall on? The 11th day of the 11th month, and that brings three ones or four ones together. All right. One, 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 one. That's it. So it's Singles Day. The Chinese value symbols. All right. Symbols
Hmm.
are very important in China. But for us, sometimes we might look at it and think, oh, this is all silly, but that's important to them. All right. And don't look down on that. The Beijing Olympics, when I was there, took place on the 8th month of 2008. These symbols are important to people there. So when you're doing business, be sensitive to that. Be
Yeah.
very aware of that and don't dismiss it as something silly.
We've talked about a whole load of different things in this conversation. I know initially it was supposed to be just around the area of digital, but I think what has become very apparent to me is just this connection of digital with so many other different other aspects within the organization. It's actually not just about digital. In fact, it's all about these other things, the people, the process as well that you talk about, and just a really interesting perspective there on the whole cultural piece as well, and just how we're kind of humility, or I think you mentioned humility, how that plays into that fact when we're actually in different cultures, and working in different cultures as well. Kisito, thank you very much indeed for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. I was so looking forward to this conversation, and I really appreciate the time that you gave me here today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Shirley, and good luck editing.
And I want to thank you, our listeners, too. I suspect you've come from very different parts of the globe and from within different industries also. And I hope that you have found the discussion as insightful and as thought-provoking as I did. By the way, if you'd like to contact me, you can do that on LinkedIn or on shirleykavanagh.com. To our listeners, I hope this has been as useful to you as it has been for me.